Yields, I now recognize Mr. Higgins, the gentleman from Louisiana and the chair of the subcommittee on the border.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My. Mr. Bowman, I wasn't even going to ask you any questions today, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to clarify it for record. And I do believe that, according to your resume, you're a professor of constitutional law, sir. Is that correct?
I am an emeritus professor at the Missouri School of Law.
You're a smart guy. You got an alphabet behind your name on your business card. So is it your position that you're taking today as a Democrat's witness that the founders' intent with the term high crimes and misdemeanors was designed to restrict the power of impeachment to a violation of specific written statute? Is that your position? We're listening.
Yes, and
that is your position. Okay, and
no, excuse me, Congressman.
You said yes. It's a simple question.
No,
I'm gonna move on.
Excuse me, Congressman.
It clearly was not reclaiming my time. It clearly was not the intention of the founders to limit the power of congressional impeachment over the executive branch, to limit that to violation of written statute.
That's quite correct, Congressman. I've written extensively.
Oh, well, thank you. But you just said something different, but that's all right. We appreciate you being here today, Mr. Bowman, and representing University of Missouri. Sure, it's a wonderful law school. On this committee, we've carried out our investigation of Secretary Mayorkas. I sit here today to tell you we're going to impeach him. He's going to be impeached, and he should be. He is the executive in charge of the border policy for President Biden. Now, President Biden has the right, as the chief executive, to hire men that don't have the skill and then figure that out down the line and replace them. President Biden also has a right as a chief executive to have wild policy in mind. But the executive that sits on his cabinet, that's in charge of actually enforcing those policies, that has the law enforcement experience to know when those policies are going to bring injury upon our country, that executive has a responsibility to advise the president that his policies are not only not working to secure the border, they're actually bringing injury upon our country. The United States Constitution is the law of the land that we swear our oath to. Secretary Mayorkas has brought generational trauma upon our country. Hundreds of thousands of American lives destroyed, hundreds of thousands dead, millions and millions, wave upon wave of human misery coming across our southern border. We're losing our country down there. My God, my colleagues, you've got to recognize this. We've got to stop this arterial bleed. It's not about money. We spent less money in 2019 than we did in 23, a lot less through DHS, and we had the border under control. It's policy that has changed, and who is driving that policy? Secretary Mayorkas. So who shall be impeached? Quite rightfully so, Secretary Mayorkas. Mr. Knudsen, from your position, sir, and I'm sorry for what you and your people and your community and your state are going through, sir, on behalf of this Congress that has been unable to take action as of yet, I'm sorry for what you're going through. Do you concur with the things that I've spoken on and shared?
I absolutely do concur, Congressman. I think this body is completely within its constitutional and legal right to bring impeachment proceedings here.
Mr. Drummond.
I also concur.
Mr. Bailey.
I concur the Secretary has abdicated his official duties. He's in dereliction of duty and should be held accountable.
I appreciate all the panelists for being here today. I thank the chairman for his leadership on this issue. He has been calm and patient and judicious in our procedure. We have laid out the case for the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas. We have promised the American people we would fulfill that somber duty, and we shall. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Payne, the gentleman from New Jersey, for his 5 minutes of question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, today's hearing would be a joke. And let me just put something out here in reference to fentanyl. It is something that is really damaging our country, our young people, obviously. But I remember in the 1980s, when the crack epidemic was prevalent, the First Lady, Nancy Reagan, told folks, just say no. So I think we need to incorporate that into this epidemic. Why is fentanyl killing so many of our folks? Because they're consuming it. We have to look at the demand for it as well. We know we have a problem in stopping it, and we are all hell-bent in doing that. But we also have to look at the demand. Or, as Nancy Reagan said, just say no. But back to the topic at hand. As I stated, this would be a joke if the stakes weren't so high and serious for the reasons laid out by my friend, Ms. Jackson Lee. I'm embarrassed for my Republican colleagues. They pretend that their fraudulent impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas is about high crimes and misdemeanors. That's because they know well, as we do, that this so-called impeachment is nothing more than an extremist MAGA takeover of the committee in this Congress. Just look at who is in the driver's seat of this fraudulent impeachment. It's not the chairman of the committee. It's not even the subcommittee chair. It's an extreme MAGA backbencher who, proverbially speaking, shoved her leadership out of the driver's seat and now has the reins of the Congress and about ready to drive us all off the cliff. The chairman can proclaim that he has led this year-long investigation into Secretary Mayorkas' leadership that led to today's proceedings, but we all know that this is false. We are here because a member of Congress who believes the anti-Semitic conspiracy that Jewish space lasers coming down to Earth caused the deadly wildfires in California in 2018. Someone who has called black people like me slaves to the Democratic Party. A woman who believes serving this great country in the military is throwing your life away. Someone who supports insurrections, who tried to destroy American democracy, who wants to defund the FBI, and someone who mocked survivors of a tragic school shooting. A member of Congress who who believes all that is brought us here. It is not Chairman Green's impeachment resolution that was referred to. This committee. Chairman Green has not even introduced an impeachment resolution. And it is not Chairman Green's so-called investigation into Secretary Mayorkas that got us here. We had an impeachment resolution before us weeks before the chairman's alleged investigation even concluded. Professor Bowman, do mere policy disputes between members of Congress and a cabinet secretary constitute impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors?
Congressman, they do not. I think the conclusion is universal among those who have studied this question, has been so since the time of the founding, that policy differences, no matter how severe, no matter how heated, are simply not grounds for impeachment.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request unanimous consent to submit an article from CBS News titled, "Marjorie Taylor Greene Backs Off Forcing Vote on Second Alejandro Mayorkas Impeachment Resolution," dated November 30th, 2023.
Without objection, so ordered.
In which Representative Greene is quoted as saying, "We need to do this. We need to move forward." So I got guarantees, so we will move forward with impeachment. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Bishop, for his 5 minutes questioning.
Mr. Bowman, it strikes me that how much your opinion has changed in just a few years. I was pointed out that in your 2019 book entitled High Crimes and Misdemeanors, A History of Impeachment for the Age of Trump, you have this passage. No Congress since that time, referring to the impeachment of Belknap, the cabinet person that Grant had dismissed before his impeachment. But you say no Congress since that time has either moved fast enough or thought it worthwhile to actually impeach a subordinate executive branch official. Nonetheless, the latent power to do so remains important. And here's the key sentence. Not only is it useful as a signal of legislative displeasure with administration personnel and policy, but the undoubted authority of Congress to impeach subordinate officials carries with it the associated powers of the House to investigate potentially impeachable conduct and of the Senate to try the allegations in articles of impeachment. Now, frankly, sir, I agree with you more today and not then. That is to say, I don't think pure policy differences is the basis for an impeachment. Neither is that what's happening here. It is exceedingly apt for that reason that the majority witnesses are 3 state attorneys general. Gentlemen, I look forward to joining you in 2025. But let me point this out. A lot of people would say, well, American people are interested in hearing something about a legal case. I think they might be. Last June, 2 of your colleagues in Texas and in Louisiana had sued Secretary Mayorkas, saying that guidelines that he issued to his department blatantly violated commands of Congress in statute to detain any criminal who had committed certain crimes and was released from state custody. Were required, the Attorney General then, the Secretary of Homeland Security later by amendment, required to detain such persons until they were deported. And persons subject to a permanent order, a final order of deportation, required to be detained. Contrary to that order, Secretary Mayorkas dismantled the detainer process completely. He said that that was going to be subject to discretion, only in cases where the department or he deems it to imperil our national security or security from additional crime, would it be done. Attorneys General sued, and here's what the Supreme Court said. You don't have standing. We can't hear from you. We can't settle this. Here's what Alito said in dissent. The Congress, to put the point simply, Congress enacted a law that requires the apprehension and detention of certain illegal aliens whose release it thought would endanger public safety. The Secretary of DHS does not agree with that categorical requirement. He prefers a more flexible policy. And the court's answer today is that the executive's policy choice prevails unless Congress, by withholding funds, refusing to confirm presidential nominees, threatening impeachment and removal, etc., can win a test of strength. In other words, Alito in defense went on and said, I don't think this is a wise decision for us to make, but that is the decision the majority made. That if you want the law to be followed, you're going to have to impeach somebody. You're going to have to, as Justice Alito said, the Congress is going to have to go to war with the executive. Mr. Knudsen, what about that? Isn't that right? Isn't that what the Congress is put to decide whether to do our duty? As the Supreme Court has said, we can't do it. It's up to the Congress. And you guys have tried to do it. You've succeeded in other areas. You're continuing to sue, and you're succeeding. Florida has enjoined some practices. I think the Supreme Court just granted an emergency relief from the DHS cutting Texas border barrier. What about that, Mr. Knudsen? I didn't leave you a lot of time, but I'm sure you can add more wisdom in 30 seconds than I did into it.
I'll be brief, Congressman. Thank you for the question. Yes, I absolutely agree not only with Justice Alito's dissent, but I would point out also in that case that the majority also pointed out, to your point, that Congress possesses an array of tools to analyze and influence those policies, and those are political checks for the political process. That's exactly what you're dealing with here. You folks have got an executive versus legislative branch war here.
So much of this, Mr. Chairman, isn't about even policy discretion that's granted to the administration. It is about square violations of law. And they cannot be remedied in court. They will either be dealt with by this Congress to vindicate the rule of law, or we will surrender rule of law to a rule of man. I yield.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Point of order.
Point of order.
The point of order. You're recognized.
I think we all heard the colleague say he's running for another office, but that violates the rule 23. And I won't ask that it be taken down. I just ask that if he's going to run, just go run. Just don't run when the committee is in session.
The gentleman has made his point of order, and I now recognize Mr. Swalwell, the gentleman from California, and our ranking member on Cybersecurity Subcommittee for his 5 minutes of questioning.
I want to thank the Attorneys General for participating today. Thank you for your service to your states. I was a prosecutor before coming to Congress. I missed that job. My father was a cop. My brothers are cops. And it seems like we've got a pretty educated group of Attorneys General here. Mr. Knudsen, you went to Montana Law School, right?
Yes, Representative.
Great. Pretty good law school. Mr. Bailey, University of Missouri, is that right?
Yes.
And you served our country after September 11 as well. Thank you for doing that. Mr. Drummond, you went to Georgetown, is that right?
I did.
That's a good school. I was rejected there twice for law school and then as a transfer. That's a very good school. I just want to level set where we all are on what's a crime, what's not a crime, because the three of you have offered testimony to my Republican colleagues about what is an impeachable offense. And I just want to go down the list here of some of the potential impeachable offenses that we've seen in the history of the Congress. Bribery, Mr. Knudsen, would you agree that's an impeachable offense?
I would, Congressman.
Mr. Drummond, would you agree bribery is an impeachable offense?
I would.
And Mr. Bailey, would you agree bribery is an impeachable offense?
Yes.
Same as extortion, Mr. Knudsen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummond, extortion?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
How about obstruction of justice? Would you agree that that's an impeachable offense, Mr. Knudsen?
If there was a conviction, yes.
Okay. Mr. Drummond?
Yes.
And Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
How about inciting violence against police officers? What would you say, Mr. Knudsen?
Again, if there was a conviction of a criminal offense, I think that would certainly rise to the level.
And Mr. Drummond, how about incitement of violence?
Yes.
And Mr. Bailey, incitement of violence?
Would need more facts to make that legal determination. I think that's bereft of sufficient facts.
And Mr. Knudsen, I just want to drill down a little bit because you said if there was a conviction. So are you saying that Mr. Mayorkas should be convicted criminally before he could be impeached?
Congressman, no. I'm simply speaking to your example of would inciting violence against a police officer rise to the level of an impeachable offense. My testimony was if there was a conviction for that crime, then yes.
Okay. And obstruction of justice, you said the same thing, right?
Correct.
But you think for Mr. Mayorkas, he does not need a conviction to be impeached?
Well, as this body has done in its past, I think there's certainly precedent. No, I do not believe there has to be a criminal offense. High crimes and misdemeanors, as it was understood by the founders, as it was understood in the English common law, does not necessarily mean there has to be an actual crime committed.
In the summer of 2019, former President Donald Trump used $300 million of taxpayer dollars to ask President Zelensky of Ukraine to get dirt on his potential primary political opponent, Joe Biden. And he was impeached in the House for that. Should he have been impeached for that, Mr. Knudsen?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not a member of this Congress. I'm not privy to all of that information. I certainly haven't seen a lot of those reports. This body chose to go forward with those proceedings, as is its purview.
Mr. Drummond?
It's outside my lane. I'm
Okay.
just a simple attorney general from Oklahoma.
Mr. Bailey?
I believe President Trump was acquitted of all charges, and that's beyond the purview of my testimony today.
On January 6th, he incited and aimed a violent mob at the Capitol. 6 police officers would later lose their lives. One lost a finger, one lost an eye. The president was impeached. 10 Republicans voted for that impeachment. Mr. Knudsen, should he have been impeached for that? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, he was.
Okay. Mr. Drummond?
He was impeached for that.
And should he have been?
I don't have an opinion on that issue.
Okay. Mr. Bailey, what do you think about that?
He was acquitted of those charges.
Okay. So what's interesting to me, and again, I respect that you all are here, is that when you've testified to Mr. Mayorkas' conduct and you believe pretty clearly that he can be impeached for his conduct, but when we go through pretty egregious conduct of using taxpayer dollars, of inciting and aiming a mob, having the greatest attack ever on this Congress, this Capitol, our Constitution, you don't want to comment on it at all. And I think what we're really seeing from the majority in all of this is that they're not interested in finding any solution on the border. In fact, what we have seen is that there's a 2014 deal in the Senate, bipartisan. They walked away when they were in the majority. Speaker Johnson has said that he will refuse any additional funding for the border. And now we have witnesses who, again, want to comment only on Mayorkas but don't want to comment on President Trump. Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I just see a party that does not want to fix, but only wants the fiction. And with that, I'll yield back.